Hey guys, Carlos Colon here with Georgia Perimeter Homes, and today we're going to be talking about closing costs. What are closing costs and what's really entailed in closing costs? So, hey guys, welcome back. So we're going to jump straight into closing costs and what's entailed in closing costs. So, the first thing, really what we're talking about is, right before closing, you're going to get what's called a HUD settlement statement, okay, or an initial ALTA. What that is all the breakdown of all the fees when you're a buyer and a seller in a home and how the numbers break down on each side. So that's the combined ALTA settlement statement. It's really what you want to look at. Depending on whether you're on the seller or the buyer, some attorneys break it down and only let you look at one side and not the other. It doesn't really matter. Just focus on your side. That's the important part. For the sake of this video, the buyer side is really the most complicated side, so we're going to go down that. And so closing costs in relation to a buyer are going to be broken up of several different things. Number one is going to be prorated property taxes. Now, sometimes that's county and city, and prorated means from January 1st until the day of closing, that seller is going to be charged for that portion of the taxes, and they're going to credit it to you as the buyer, because you're going to pay all of the taxes for that year in the state of Georgia at the end of the year, typically in November here in this state. So just know that that's how that breaks down. So that's property taxes, that's number one. So usually for the buyer, that's a credit. As you get closer to the end of the year though, that might be a debit, depending on if they've already paid those taxes for the year, especially between November and December. That's the only time it would really typically be a debit for the buyer. Now, next is going to be insurance premiums. So home insurance premiums, to be specific. During this process, if you're typically getting a loan for this property, your lender will require you to have gotten insurance on this property, a home insurance. And so in getting home insurance, your home insurance will charge you a certain amount at closing. And so that's an insurance premium in order to start your policy. In most cases, this is 6 months to a year's worth of insurance collected up front. It's important to know this because not every insurance company operates the same way. So when you do this, they're going to charge you that 1 year at closing. Well, if you can imagine, if your 1 year's insurance is $2,000, that's a big chunk of change to pay at closing. So that's a big portion of your closing costs as a buyer. So this is always why you should always shop around for your insurance that you're going to get. And if you have any questions about that, make sure that you go, hey, what's the minimum coverage for my lender? And what's the maximum deductible that I can get as well with my lender? And then bring that to insurance companies and quote that out correctly so that you can get the lowest rate. Next are going to be your lender fees, okay? Lender fees are going to be entailed with a bunch of different things. So number one, your actual loan officer, how much they're getting paid, your underwriter, your processor, or their underwriter or processor. Also your appraisal, if they're crediting or debiting the appraisal at closing. There's sometimes in properties, especially when they're flipping them, when sometimes you might have to get two appraisals and they charge the second one at closing. So it's important to know how that operates, but there's a lot of lender fees involved there. Also, if they, sometimes they breeze over this, the loan officers do, but discount points or points being charged in order to get you a certain rate or interest rate for your loan. So that means that you're actually paying down in order to get your interest at a certain level. And so it's important to know what those charges are. And so typically 1 point would be 1% of whatever you're borrowing. And so it's important to understand how that plays into account here. So lender fees is a big portion of it. Along with those lender fees, we're also going to have a down payment. So that down payment is going to be dependent upon what kind of loan you're getting. There are all kinds of conventional loans, so don't ever think that it's just 20% conventional. Conventional is always 20%. No, there's a 3% conventional, a 5% conventional, and it goes up from there. And yes, you can do a 20% conventional. That's an option. There's also FHA, which is 3.5% down. There's also VA, which is 0% down. Throughout all of those loan processes, there's always charges as well within that particular loan product. And so, for example, FHA has a 1.75% funding premium that they charge at closing to provide you with that loan. And so that's part of your closing costs as well. So USDA is 100%, and so no down payment. But again, they also have a funding fee that they charge at closing. So just understand how those processes works. And also, if you're using a first-time home buyer incentive, is how does that affect your closing costs? Make sure to talk to your lender about those details. Next is going to be your attorney fees. So your attorney is going to charge you for a couple different things. Number one, a title search. So they're searching for the history of the property to make sure that you have clear and free title when you go to take ownership of this property. Also, they're going to do an insurance, title insurance rather, to ensure that if anybody should come after your ownership or during your ownership and claim ownership to this property, that you're going to be covered no matter what, because there's this insurance policy that covers the title work that they did on your behalf. And so those fees are important. And of course, the attorney's fee themselves for doing the closing for you. Those are all fees that are entailed in all that. Typically the company that does the title search for them or a third-party company. Sometimes they use 2 or 3 different companies depending on how busy they are. And so it just depends. But yes, you can also shop around to see who the cheapest attorney is going to be for you and go with that route, or just ask your agent who they trust and use all the time. The next fee that's not so common that you probably need to be aware of is also agent fees. So as a buyer, typically you don't have agent fees that you pay at closing in the state of Georgia. The reason why that is because typically when a home is listed for sale online on the MLS, they have already agreed to share a certain amount of that percentage of the sale with the agent that brings the buyer. Okay, that's normal. However, sometimes buyer's agents have additional fees with their brokerage that they're charging to the buyer. And so it's important to know that when you're selecting a real estate agent to work with, you ask them 100% flat out, are there any fees I need to know about that I'm going to be paying at closing to be in business with you? Okay, and so as a buyer, it's important to know, because I've seen some weird things happen over the last several years, which is I've seen some buyers charge almost $1,000, or I'm sorry, an agent charge almost $1,000 to their client at the closing table. And so I'll give you an example. If the agent expects to make 3%, and as part of their brokerage agreement with you, they explain to you, or maybe they did explain to you and you didn't know that you signed this, that if they don't make 3%, the buyer has to pay the difference between whatever they're actually getting and 3%, and they're going to charge that to you at closing. Well, maybe you didn't know that, but you need to look through that paperwork and understand what it is that you're actually being charged for as a buyer. Okay, that should make a big difference in who you choose to work with as well. Okay, so agent fees. The last thing that's also not so common, but it does happen, is going to be some other random fees. For example, sometimes we're buying a home warranty on the side, and that's going to be charged at closing to the buyer or the seller, depending on how your agent negotiated that in the contract. Other times your lender has said, listen, we're going to do all this, but it's going to be contingent at closing on you paying off this credit card or you paying off this car. And so maybe you only owe $1,000 to your car, and they want to make sure that that payment is gone in order to show that you can approve for owning this home without any issues. Well, great. Well, what they usually do is they tie that amount that you owe into the closing so that they know for a fact it's going to be paid off with you owning this home. So those are all the fees that are associated. Of course, we could go into full length and detail about this. That will be much longer in detail, and you can call us for some of those details. But if you have any questions about this, or have any questions about how closing works, or you're looking to buy or sell a home in the state of Georgia, give us a call at 770-314-1285, or check out our website at www.georgiaperimeterhomes.com. Thanks, you guys.